and this live stream we're going to talk about psychedelic nonsense. There's quite a lot of it out there, and I think it's honestly one of the most probably uh, like densely laden with misinformation and Gallen-Kruger and people speaking even though they do not know. Uh, and so there are myths, there's misrepresentations, there are misunderstanding, there is propaganda from the government trying to discourage people from using these wonderful medicines to liberate themselves and to heal their traumas and all the wonderful things that psychedelics can do for us. Um, and so uh, I guess the first myth we'll bust. Most of you guys probably know this. Timothy Leary did not invent LSD, but people say that or ask that all the time. Did Timothy Leary, or they think that Timothy Leary invented LSD. Timothy Leary was a Harvard psychologist, and the story is actually really interesting of how Gordon Wasson and Albert Hofmann and Leary ended up being connected. It's a very synchronistic thing. A lot of it defies belief. William S. Burroughs' involvement in the situation is particularly crazy because Leary and Burroughs randomly ran into each other in like a random bar in the middle of the Peruvian jungle, both looking for yahe or ayahuasca. And that just makes no sense that those two guys would end up in the same place at the same time looking for the same then totally obscure psychedelic plant. It really truly, I've always felt like this process is guided by some kind of intelligence, even if that's just a fundamental symmetry that is in the wiring under the board. Some of this stuff just does not seem like it was the product of chance. And I have trouble accepting that there isn't some kind of higher order expressed in these stories. And so another myth that we'll bust, Tim Leary was not a CIA agent. A lot of people say that too, and I know where those stories came from, and I can explain what happened there. One of the things that blows my mind about this rumor that the entire psychedelic movement, a lot of people say, is a government psyop, and that Timothy Leary and Terence McKenna and all these people were CIA agents. I really want to meet the CIA agent that scripted Timothy Leary. Like, go look up some of his stuff at his best. There are very few people in human history that have had the capacity to articulate the psychedelic experience the way he does, or any experience for that matter. He was a Mensa certified genius. His IQ was well over 160, one of the highest ever recorded. Another one that I ran into recently is that Gordon Wasson is a CIA agent, and we're going to break that one down a little bit because it is not true. And it's just really ridiculous, and it's almost as valuable, I think, to examine these things, to identify the places where our critical thinking is breaking down, which is a common thing with conspiracy theories. And it's unfortunate because I think most of the conspiracy theories let's talk about the Gordon one real quick. Gordon and his wife, I think her name was Valentina, were amateur mycologists, and they had noticed that people worship these mushrooms in different places around the world. And so I can't remember exactly how they got in touch with Maria Sabina. Oh, okay. Well, they had heard of her tribe and knew that they consumed a mushroom for visions. But he had no idea what he was getting himself into. He was a banker. I think he was like president of Sears and Roebuck for a time. And this is where the conspiracy stuff comes in, because he was on a list of 8 people that were being considered to head like the Trilateral Commission, or one of these like big money managing, one of the big ones from the conspiracy theory New World Order list of shady government shit, right? Um, so that is just kind of stretched to like, well, he was elite, so he must have been a CIA agent and somehow you know working for the government. And so was Maria Sabina, the indigenous woman, also a CIA plant. I mean, that sounds almost as outrageously stupid as the rest of it, maybe even more so, I guess. So if you just think this through a little bit, it doesn't make any sense. So um, Gordon Wasson was not a CIA agent. And so what happened when he went to see Maria Sabina is that she gave him an absolutely ridiculous dose of mushrooms. I think it was like 32 grams or something, and just completely just blew his head off. So that was how we basically, that's how the psychedelic scene had its catalyst. Before that, there was Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. He's another one that the conspiracy theorists are all saying, he was a eugenicist. And they don't understand, I guess, that this comes from his grandfather, Thomas Henry Huxley, being a geneticist and discovering the gene sequence. I think it was some, fundamental discovery regarding genetics that Thomas Henry Huxley, Aldous Huxley's grandfather, discovered. And so that has become, he was a eugenicist, elite, New World Order guy. But so, this is the catalyst that created this movement, where Huxley's Doors of Perception. Aleister Crowley actually is the earliest, probably, famous person to talk about mescaline. He wrote about mescaline and hashish. He wrote a paper about hashish called Roll Away the Stone. And so after Huxley, we had Leary. And Leary was a totally straight Harvard psychologist. And this is hard to imagine, okay? Try to imagine the 1950s. And then you suddenly are on LSD at 52 years old. I mean, he was 52 years old, and suddenly I guess mushrooms in Cuernavaca were actually the original thing. So what happened is that Wasson found the mushrooms, got them from Maria Sabina, and he thought, well, who do we send this to? How about a psychology professor at Harvard? So he sends the mushroom to Leary, and Leary had just also received LSD from Albert Hofmann for the same reason. And so Leary sent the mushroom samples, part of it, to Hofmann, who became the first person to isolate the compound psilocybin and figure out what was going on with the mushrooms. All of these circumstances here, I guess it's funny that so many conspiracy theorists are religious, because what they see is human manipulation rather than like divine orchestration of these really, really improbable scenarios, right? It's all a government trick. And I don't think I should have to tell you that, most of these conspiracy theories actually originate with the Christian right wing. They're trying to confirmation bias the whole world and make every part of it fulfill biblical prophecy. And so anything that people believe will catalyze some spiritual experience that's not Jesus is therefore the devil. And that dichotomy is that simple for them. And so what happens is these ideas escape into non-Christian demographics, and people don't realize where they're coming from. So yeah, again, I want to meet the guy that is that was writing the script for Timothy Leary and Terrence McKenna, the CIA people that were doing that. Also, they spent billions, if not trillions, of dollars in propaganda. The Romans designed Christianity in order to enslave and create pacifists, and to curtail actual spiritual experience, because it empowers people, right? So they designed a religion that would actually ensure that people didn't have any real spiritual awakenings or any kind of gnosis, blind faith, not certainty, right? So they spent all this money since ancient Rome engineering all of this propaganda, all this mind control stuff, dumbing the population down, just to give them all LSD and psilocybin and increase their intelligence and build their brains up and turn them all into iconoclasts that are tearing down traditional structures and abandoning the religions. And it's just really, if you just I just the psychedelics as conspiracy theory thing is just the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life, except for the flat Earth. Those guys are actually, it's a little bit dumber, not much, but it's a little bit dumber. Okay, so that's the main thing with that. I mean, CIA wants to undo all of their propaganda and all of their all the sheep that are, it's just, what the fuck are people talking about? And also, you can't fake this stuff. When you've had these kind of experiences, and you, I mean, to possess the genius that's necessary to articulate it, I think actually comes from these substances. And that is something that a lot of people may have a hard time accepting, but the reality is that under clinical controlled circumstances, LSD has, genius induction has been observed in people that were test subjects that were given LSD. Turn them into geniuses from average to below average IQ, and just kick them up to genius with a single dose. And this is a relatively rare occurrence, but it does happen. And IQ increase is something that has been recorded with psilocybin. So it is one of the great myths of psychedelic drugs that they make you insane. And the reality is that you're already insane. If you are, as Aldous Huxley observed all the way back in the 1920s, normal people are actually profoundly mentally ill because they are adjusted to such a sick reality, and it's no it's not complimentary to call someone normal, to put it mildly. So I think that what actually happens with psychedelics is that, well, I don't know why I just said I know that they dissolve these imprints, they dissolve the boundaries of the parameters of our perception, so that our bandwidth is wider, and we can actually perceive more subtle layers of the reality that we live in. And so this informs us with greater depth as to what this reality is communicating to us, what it's made out of, why it's here, what we should be doing with it. Because we're receiving a more finessed, more subtle, more highly detailed input from the universe. In fact, this idea that this is a funny thing too. Science informs us that we perceive the universe from a hopelessly narrow bandwidth of like less than 1% of the full spectrum of just of light, okay? And then it's so presumptuous that it wants to speak about the existence of all of the things outside of that bandwidth as if it knows. You know what I mean? It's kind of fucking insane to do that. It's like the most presumptuous, ridiculous thing. Like we can tell you that you don't perceive hardly any of the universe, but we know there's nothing meaningful beyond this bandwidth that, just shut up. It's so the idea that that there are filters in the nervous system that actually help us to reduce the sensory input to something manageable. Something manageable by, as Terence McKenna said, there's a reducing valve in the nervous system, and if you turn it down or off, you can perceive these other dimensions of reality. And I feel like the reason that, psilocybin is sort of like one personality of this universal mind, DMT has its own aesthetic, its own beings that seem to inhabit the precognition and these other sort of uh, parapsychological phenomena that occur so commonly. Hello, Charles, with people that have experienced these compounds. That is why, and there are some things about psychedelics that sound like myths that are actually true, like increasing your intelligence. And you guys, if you want to get blown away, go back and read Timothy Leary talking about psychedelics, or I made a video you can watch where there's a bunch of quotes. It goes by too fast. You're going to have to pause it. I was really upset when I found that out. But I think it's the best description of the psychedelic experience that you're going to find. And so listening to him talk about how they work and what they do before any of the research was done pretty much proves that they allow you to access information through non-ordinary means, because he knew exactly what they were doing, and the brain scans had not been done yet. It's really remarkable to hear him talk about them. Yeah, well, neurogenesis is catalyzed by all of the indole ring psychedelics, and neuroplasticity is enhanced by all of the indole ring psychedelics, the phenethylamines and ketamine even, allows you to repattern the brain more rapidly. Hello, everyone. So, okay, now here's let's. Oh wait, we were talking about. Okay, so there's a lot of people asking about DMT in the third eye, the pineal gland. I've told this story a few times on my channel. I don't want to be redundant, but I once drank ayahuasca with a shaman, and I could see through my forehead. And it was really, really, really strange. So the next morning, and remember that the pineal gland is connected with the sixth sense in general. People think that if we have sixth sense, it comes from the pineal gland. And it's really strange to me that people called it a third eye, and it actually, as I found out after this experience, so I went downstairs the next morning, and the shaman, the first thing he says to me is, sometimes you can see through your third eye when you drink the medicine, or you see through your forehead, he said. And I'm like, just randomly, like, that's what you have to say. And, you guys remember that the compounds in ayahuasca were called telepamine and telepatine for the first, 30 years that they were researched. So, because these experiences are so common, in fact, masters in Houston, PhD medical doctors, did a bunch of studies in 1963 through 66 until the government sent cops to shut them down and banned psychedelic substances. They were doing research, and one of the things that they did to test the telepathy with ayahuasca is they had somebody on the bottom floor of the building looking at like a really, really improbable drawing. So a bunch of random stuff, like one of them, literally, I remember it was a burning hill with someone skiing, and there was a UFO on it. Like really, really complicated, weird shit. And people were like 99% accurate. And so they felt like they had absolutely proved that ayahuasca induces telepathy. And I don't think that we need to think of this as woo, because we're talking about bringing down filters that screen out a lot of the incoming sensory information, right? So when you're receiving telepathy, it's just that your filters are open, and it's not really that hard to understand how it could be possible. And so, but to maintain the third eye thing, or to stay on that course, it absolutely does activate it, and people really, really commonly report occult hangovers after using DMT for the first time. So synchronicities increase, precognition starts to happen, telepathy experiences, all that kind of stuff. Daniel Pinchbeck wrote a lot about that sort of thing. Um, and so I think that that is the sort of thing that people might think is mythological, but is actually real. And then a really important one to address is that whether or not psychedelics will make you insane. And the studies on this are absolutely certain and very, very clear. Um, no, they won't. And if it was possible, I mean, I know people, shaman, that drink ayahuasca like 3 times a week, sometimes more, for long periods because they do so many ceremonies and they're fine. So, you know, if taking psychedelics often made you crazy, I would think that the people that drink ayahuasca 3 times a week for 10 years would have lost their minds a long time ago. And it just doesn't happen. The reality is that the only people that are in danger of a psychotic break or being flipped schizo by psychedelics are people that are predisposed to mental illness. So there is some risk of triggering latent mental illness. The thing is, if you trigger it, you can use LSD to reverse it almost no matter what it is. And I've seen this question a number of times on this channel, people asking whether or not it's okay for people with schizophrenia to take psychedelics. The answer is definitely not, unless they're in a controlled situation with people that are trained. Why didn't you guys tell me my face has been frozen in this crazy position this whole time? I guess the plug wasn't plugged in and my phone is about to die. So that's why I was just frozen in that unflattering pose. Do me a favor, just in case this dies, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon or one of the options in the chat or in the description, because we get no money for this and we really do appreciate your support. So psychedelics will not make you crazy. Unless you're predisposed to mental illness, and then if you do trigger it, if you find the right people, you can actually use psychedelics to reverse it. Another rumor is this LSD causes chromosome breakage. Timothy Leary had his chromosomes examined after, you know, several decades of taking ridiculous amounts of LSD, and his chromosomes were fine. So that's right out. You're not going to have goofy-looking offspring because you took LSD. Rumors about ayahuasca. There is a lot of stuff that people believe about ayahuasca that is completely wrong. And I almost hesitate to talk about it because people get mad. I think they feel like, you know, they have respect for their shaman and they don't want to believe that they have believed false information or something. But a lot of the things that have been created by the ayahuasca industry since 1993 are completely modern innovations that have no traditional basis. And so that is something that if you're really interested in the history of it, you should know. You know, it actually cost me a really good client once because he was saying, you know, I really want to have a traditional experience the way they did it 200 years ago. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. And he just kind of blew me off. He didn't understand what I was saying, that there is no traditional experience for you to have ayahuasca. Ayahuasca was consumed by the shaman, and it was not consumed to heal anything. It was all about getting information. It was about remote viewing. It was about connecting to the universal mind. It was about hunting. It was about divining weather patterns, but it was not about healing anything. The shaman would use it so that he could see, you know, the energetic darts, or you know, there's a number of ways that they described these energetic body parasites, or, you know, poison arrows, and they, you know, so he could see them and suck them out. But none of these ceremonies that people go to thinking that it's traditional are traditional, because traditionally you wouldn't drink ayahuasca. The shaman would drink it, and then he would look at you and figure out what was wrong with you, if anything. So it's just not real. You know, this whole thing of group ceremonies and people thinking that it's like a traditional, it's not. There are a few tribes that did have group ayahuasca, but they're none of the ones you've heard of. Another one that is crazy with ayahuasca is that Icaro is not a Shipibo word, and see, I lost quite a few people when I started talking about how all this ayahuasca stuff is bullshit. It always happens, because I guess they're attached to their beliefs, and people like to think they know stuff. And the only reason I know is because I've been researching this stuff for 30 years. So I know what it looked like before the ayahuasca industry, and it's like there's the dieta is mostly just crap that people have made up in the last 10 years. When the shaman that tell you they're reading it off the internet while they're making your like, what do people expect me to tell them? And I know that this happens because I have gotten close enough to them to watch it. They will abandon their own traditional practices in order to conform to your expectations as an ayahuasca tourist, right? It's actually a really sad thing, and I think it's kind of destructive because what we end up with is this new age integration of new age ideas into, I mean, I've seen them talking about Yoshimoto's water experiment where the ice crystals is totally fake experiment, and these shaman are talking about it as they're opening their ceremonies. It's really okay. So Icaro is not a Shipibo word, and Icaros are not ayahuasca songs traditionally. That's not what it means. That's another thing that the ayahuasca industry has just created. The term has just come to apply to any song that is sung during an ayahuasca ceremony. And ayahuasca, ayahuasca is a Shipibo word as well. It's the name that not the Shipibo, sorry, the Quechua. And the Quechua gave us the word Icaro as well. And so it means healing through smoke. And you'll still see the real Icoros will be used when you harvest a planta maestra, like this. Check it out. Can you guys see that? Those are Bobinsana flowers. Let me see if I can. It's all so hard for me to figure out where the damn camera is when I'm holding it like this. Anyways, the Bobinsana flowers are super cool. So when you go to cut the plant, you'll blow the smoke, and there's kind of like a whistle or a hum that accompanies it, even maybe a song, depending on the shaman. But Icaro actually means healing through smoke, and it's not a Shipibo word, and it has nothing to do with singing songs during ceremony. Traditionally, now that's what people mean, but an Icaro is not that. So, it's not traditional for the patient to consume ayahuasca to heal themselves. It was the shaman that would consume it, and then he would heal. But no such thing as a traditional ayahuasca ceremony. Yeah, it's too bad. Phosphorus. My face is frozen in this ridiculous position because of my phone's battery, and I sometimes my computer glitches, so I didn't know what was going on. Let's see, what else do we got here in terms of complete bullshit? Obviously, psychedelics don't make you stupid. They actually, studies have confirmed that they increase IQ, that your memory is enhanced by psilocybin dramatically. So we have 10% battery left. Man, that's too bad because I could really go on and on about a lot of this stuff. They don't make you insane. The psychedelic movement was not created by the CIA. Okay, so somebody asked about marijuana. I don't smoke marijuana. I used to grow 20-foot pot plants with 10 pounds on them. I've grown probably 300 strains. I used to smoke a lot of pot, but I think marijuana occupies some weird space between psychedelic and like drug, and it's definitely very widely abused. And if you abuse anything, it will abuse you. So interestingly, though, cannabis actually has the cannabinoids have neuroprotective abilities. So they actually protect the brain from damage. And so this idea that marijuana makes you stupid is definitely not true. And the way that it affects short-term memory is very easily reversed, because if you abstain, it sort of neutralizes the brain cells, and over time they sort of reactivate. So it's not damage. It's more like it puts some of them on vacation. Um, Not all psilocybin mushrooms grow in dung. Um, okay, well, yeah, and if you guys have questions about anything specific, yeah, well, there's all kinds of different schizophrenia, and I mean, you have to be careful if you're schizophrenic and you use psychedelics. It's definitely not advised. But there are treatments that have been developed to help people that are schizophrenic that utilize psychedelic medicine. Um, so, what else? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, the Terence McKenna in The Visible Language, um, kind of an interesting thing, because you're saying that we need to develop it, and I wonder if it doesn't already exist. The first time that I took LSD, or maybe the second time when I was 14 or 15 years old, I remember going through like a concrete tunnel, and there were these shifting patterns. Everybody knows those, but I had taken a pretty strong dose, so they were really clear. And I looked at it and I thought, that's a language, it's an alphabet. And so many, many years later, Allison Gray, the wife of Alex Gray, actually painted them. And she basically said they were like the LSD alphabet. And I thought that was really interesting that, I had seen these things and sort of intuited that it was a language. And then Allison Gray paints them and says that it's a language. So, pretty interesting. Yeah, MDMA does not put holes in your brain. That is absolutely true. Psychoactive alkaloids and bobensana, yes, but not in concentrations that are going to be active. Bobensana is also called corazon, which is Spanish for heart, and it is very, very good at opening up your emotional body. It's also used to treat mild aches and pains, and a few other things, but it does contain harmalas, which are the same compounds that are found in the ayahuasca vine, but in very small amounts. Although I have wondered if it might not be possible to brew, maybe Charlie Ponga with just Bobensana rather than ayahuasca, because the harmala alkaloids could still activate the DMT. So that's an experiment that I haven't set out. Oh, if you take too much LSD, you will not stay tripping. That's another myth. LSD per ounce is less toxic, or gram, I guess, is less toxic than vitamin C by weight, right? You would have to drink, I think it's like a gallon of it or something in order to have a fatal overdose. It could have even been a 5-gallon bucket. It's something crazy. Don't quote me, obviously, but it's at least a gallon, I'm sure of that. And then, I told the story a few weeks ago, and this is something you guys can look up. Don't believe the guy on PBS, because he outright lies. He says that the people that did this were vomiting blood and they have all these problems and stuff. It's crazy the extent that people will go through to try to maintain this narrative that psychedelics are somehow dangerous and bad, because that guy's lying through his fucking teeth. Nothing bad happened to these people. 10 people total in 2 separate incidents did lines of LSD that they thought were something else, MDMA or whatever. And so they estimated about 20,000 micrograms per person, which is huge. What would that be, like a couple of sheets. So They all were back to base level within 12 hours, and they checked in with both groups 5 years later. No one reported flashbacks, no one reported any mental illness. All of them were totally fine. So, and this stuff is important to know because if you're ever tripping bizols and you're freaking out and you're worried, oh my God, I've really done it this time, I'm not coming back. There's no way like to go this far out, and come back, and then you just have to remind yourself that's not actually a thing. That's just scare tactics that people made up a long time ago to discourage people from using them. In fact, most of the LSD horror stories were traced back to government agencies. The person that put the frying pan on their face, and the person that jumped out of a window that he thought was on fire, the building was on fire. That was true, but it was actually the CIA that dosed him without his knowledge and left him in a room with windows by himself on the 14th floor. Nixon had to apologize to his family for that one. So, yeah. Where were we going with this? I'm trying to think. There was something left. We really burned through that subject, huh? I mean, there's a lot of dumb. Oh, wait. No, we weren't done with that last one. I only got an hour of sleep last night, so I might be a little bit brain dead at the moment. My apologies. Oh man, what the hell were we talking about? Okay, I already answered the psychoactive alkaloids and bobensonic question. Oh, hyper persistent perceptual HPPD, probably not real. There have been numerous, and you guys got to remember, there are people out there that will do anything to get attention. And I talk about this all the time, but I think that because people don't understand what psychedelics are, we have a lot of people that take them expecting just to get high and then to return to normal. And that's not what happens. What happens is that the parameters of what's available to you to experience have moved. And so you experience synchronicities and you experience telepathy and precognition and trails all the time because they're really there. The things that you hallucinate on LSD, that's another myth. No matter how high the dose is, you're not going to see stuff that looks like it's really there. It is possible to get lost in visions to the point where you don't know what's real and what's not. But psilocybin, LSD, DMT hallucinations are always in the, they're like under the aesthetic of the imaginary. They don't appear to be real. And that happens with datura. True hallucinations is the word for those type of hallucinations, but psychedelics don't do that. So, any other questions, guys? Because I feel like I've just, yep, won't make you crazy, will make you smarter, will open your third eye. So yeah, what I was saying is that people expand their consciousness and they're not expecting that. So then they're walking around going, oh my God, my trip never ended, and they're making TikTok videos saying, no, my trip never ended, it's been 4 years or whatever. And the reality is that their consciousness has changed and they don't know that that's really a thing. And so, and the reason I hate it so much is that people, yeah, I have often wondered about McKenna running from the DEA for transporting hash. Talk about the calcified pineal gland myth. Yeah, well, that's a funny thing. I mean, it's possible that Terrence was a rat, that he ratted someone out, or he may have just ducked and dodged it long enough that he... actually, I did hear him explain this, and I just don't remember what it was. I don't think they actually busted him. I think they just knew about him, and he had a very close call or something, but I don't think he was actually busted. Um, so and then also I didn't explain about Leary. Leary did actually talk to the cops, but he wasn't a CIA agent. When they locked him up, they put him in a cell with Charles Manson because they thought that that was going to be bad for him, I guess. And so Manson, of course, loved him and took care of him, made sure he had everything he wanted while he was in the pen. Um, and the Weathermen Underground arranged an escape, and so they came and flew a helicopter over the prison and airlifted Leary to Africa, or eventually to Africa. The helicopter didn't fly him straight to Africa, but to Africa, where he was caught again by CIA agents and brought back to the United States because Nixon said he was the most dangerous man in the world because of his message: think for yourself, question authority, tune in, turn on, drop out, and take over. And people always forget that last part of the phrase, take over. It wasn't just tune on, turn in, drop out. Um, so, yeah, okay. So the pineal gland thing, people talk about calcifying your pineal gland. The pineal gland is two calcium crystals that are a little bit out of phase with each other, and so they're piezoelectric, and the movement is what creates the electromagnetic pulses that give our consciousness its relationship with the energy in the universe, in my opinion. It's basically the basis of how the pineal gland works. And